Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is, as it says right here, the Nitecore TM9K TAC. Oh yeah, this is tactical. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank Nitecore for sending this guy along. They reached out to me, said, hey Nick, we know you've liked some of the other ones in the series, TM4K and the TM10K. You want to check out the 9K? Like, sure, why not, right? But nonetheless, I told him as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, Nitecore is a company, I've actually shown you a bunch of their stuff, right? Because they tend to specialize in weird stuff, right? You get like the Nitecore Tip here, or the Nitecore Tiny. This little guy right here, this is the Tiny 2, actually. Or, of course, the TM10K 10,000 lumens flashlight, or the 4K, which I'm a little disappointed that they did not write 9,000 lumens on this at any point here, but whatever. I'll say it in my mind. So this is a company I've done a lot of looking at, and this TM series, they're tiny monsters, although I guess technically this is just a T4K, but it feels genetically related. But this is a light that is very, very bright in a relatively small form factor. And actually, that brings us to the next point, which is size comparison. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, as always. Next thing, let's put it up against a ruler, which is what sane people measure things in. We're looking at just over 5 inches here, counting the overall size of the switch, the back there, and we find that we're right around about 4 centimeters overall width here, so a little bit longer than 2.5 inch or 1.5 inches for the width here. Next to the TM10K here, we see this is not tiny, particularly. In fact, it's bigger than the TM10K. Certainly perceptually it is. Next to the 4K. Yeah, and then here it is against a couple of other points of comparison. This is an 18650 battery, as well as a standard AA battery. So what we see here is this is a big light in a variety of ways. And then finally, one quick note, just to get it out of the way early. This is $160 as a flashlight, which is a lot of money in the modern market. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting light. So on the good side, to start with, the durability on this is pretty good. It's IP68 and 2 meters IP68 dust resistance, and it is a 2 meters water resistant. So you should be able to drop this in the drink and pull it back out, and things should still work okay. That's absolutely a beautiful thing, and I appreciate that very much. You've also got a little, in terms of that, you also have a little flappy dude here. Oh, that's the technical term, of course. Oh, come here. I'm going to use this little pry bar from the EDC Specialties. And what we see here is there is a cover for the USB port, which keeps dust and gunk from getting in there, which is a nice thing. Next thing, this guy has a lockout mode. This is something I've complained about a fair amount on some of Nitecore's stuff. Yeah, let me turn this down to a reasonable amount. Where if you are, while you are running this guy, if you press both buttons, it puts it into lockout mode. And you can tell that because it, oh, damn it, I don't think I did it. Here we go. Come on. I know I can do this. There we go. Okay, cool. So now I put it in lockout mode. The timing I'm not very good at, I will admit this. I haven't used it that much. But nonetheless, at this point, I can put this on or off as much as I'd like. And when you hit the buttons, all you see is this little blue guy lighting up. To start it back up again, this one's easy. You just do tick, tick, tick. And now it starts back up again, and it is a normal light. Here, I'm going to see if I can do that more reasonably. Did I get it that time? God. Guys, I'm not a brilliant man, but you're supposed to press both of these at the same time while the light is on, and that should do the trick. Either way, it is an interesting thing, and maybe you don't press it to the point of cliction. Oh, there we go. Got it that time. Either way, luckily it's easier to get out than it is to get in. 3, there we go. So it does have a lockout mode. That's a nice thing, given that there is no way to remove the battery or otherwise. That's kind of a necessity for shipping and things like that. Next thing, this is using USB-C for recharging. It's got a little USB-C port right here, and I can take a USB-C cable, and I can plug that right on into here. And what you're going to see here is that once you do that, the little light comes on there. Right now it's flashing, which indicates it is not fully charged, which makes sense because I've been using and carrying it. But eventually it will start, well, going solid at that point. You know it is fully charged and you're good to go. So I like that they're using USB-C recharging, and I like that it's USB-C rather than micro, because that is sort of the wave of the future. And the recharging process has been very easy, very intuitive, and because the battery's not accessible otherwise, that's the only way to recharge it. So that is something to keep in mind. Next thing, this has a very strong and very clicky power button. I mean, you can hear it. Yeah, it's a big old clicky guy, right? And so although it's very easy to turn it on part of the way, to get it to stay on, you do need to put in some force there. And I think that's nice to have that positive and tactile engagement. It feels quite good. I appreciate that. Next thing, the interface on this is pretty intuitive, lockouting aside, because what you have here is two buttons. You got one button here, and you got another button here. And when you press this button, the big one, it turns on. And then when you press the other one, it gets brighter, 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 dim. And so that's all you're doing. You just press the smaller button to toggle the modes. If you want to get to the turbo mode, you hold that down, and that puts it into the 9,000 lumen turbo mode, which I'm a little blind right now, I will freely admit. And then also you can hold that button while the light is off to get turbo mode. The smaller mode button will give you turbo mode direct from an off state, which is all the more reason why you probably do need to use the lockout if you're keeping this in a pack or something like that, right? So there is that. And then if you double click this button, and I'll show you this later on, you get the flashing stroby disco mode. So there you go. I do appreciate, by the way, that you can use the turbo directly from off just by holding this button down. The place where this is actually most useful for me is in charging watch loom. This is really dumb, but you know, if you do something like that, then the loom on your watch is absolutely fully charged. So if you just hit your loom on the watch before bedtime, just like a quick little tick, suddenly your loom is absolutely good to go. And it's, I think, useful for that. It's been very useful for me in that way. Honestly, that's the way in which this has gotten the most use, aside from the occasional late walk, right? So it is it's very straightforward there. So there's that. Next thing, you can get a lot of different levels out of this guy, right? So the turbo mode is, which I'll hold this down to show off, is 9,800 lumens. And that is, it's thermally limited, basically. That will run until it can't run anymore. And already, I gotta say, this light is getting hot, right? That is one of those modes that is sufficiently, well, it's hot, right? 100%. And so there is no long-term runtime for that because it will overheat at a point and go back to high. So there's that. If you want to go to the high level here, which, let's see here, is this level, you are looking at 2,000 lumens on high, and you get 3 hours of runtime at this level. On the medium setting, you get 4 hours, which is at 500 lumens. And then on the low setting, you're getting 14 hours at 130 lumens. And for 30 lumens, you are on the ultra low setting, which will get you 60 hours of runtime. 30 lumens isn't a lot, by the way. That is a relatively dim light. But at the same time, it is enough to navigate a dark room. And, you know, so in that kind of case, it is nice that you have options to a pretty low mode. It is not like a moonlight mode. It's not an ultra low mode, but it is still low enough that you got plenty of runtime. So there are lots of levels here. And as a result, you end up with relatively fine runtimes, right? To be fair, I mean, on the ultra high modes, your runtime is 3 hours. That's not great. But at the same time, 130 lumens for 14 hours, that's more than enough for a night shift, right? That will give you plenty of time with a little bit of excursion left. You know, if you need turbo for a moment, that'll give you plenty of time. So I feel like the runtimes on this guy are fine, right? You'll probably average out someplace in that 4 to 14 hour range, and that's going to cover most people for a night shift, and it's easy enough to recharge it at, you know, in the morning too. So that can be a great thing, and to me, all of that is the good, is that it's got fine runtimes, lots of levels. You can hold the turbo button from off, hold the mode button from off to get turbo quickly for charging watch loom, among other things. You got a very intuitive interface, a strong clicky power button, a very, very nice USB-C recharge functionality, a lockout mode, and good durability. The great side to me, I mean, the thing that is, frankly, the remarkable thing about this, rather than any of the other small tube lights, is the output level, right? I am pointing this guy at the other side of my room, right? This is not anywhere near where I am filming. The nearest wall is probably like 10 feet behind me, and I'm going to turn it into turbo mode here, and you're going to see just how much that has lit up my review area, right? It is absolutely too damn bright. For most purposes, the turbo mode. It is ridiculously bright. It is also ridiculously hot, so you want to keep that in mind, but this puts out an amount of lumens that is basically comical. That is, I need to wear sunglasses if I fire this off indoors level of light. And that is impressive, right? This is absolutely a tiny monster. And the way that you get that is having all these damn emitters on the front of it. Yeah, that's going to cause that, right? So this is an incredibly bright light for brief periods of time in a form factor that is not all that much bigger than some of your other approaches, although certainly It is bigger. So, nonetheless, this puts out a ridiculous amount of light when you need it, and that to me is that's the distinguishing feature here. So, to me, that's what's great. The bad side, to start with, that there is battery indication, right? When you first turn this guy on, you do get some battery indication. It does have, for instance, this will be flashing in blue, I believe, if you are below 50. I'm sorry, it flashes slowly if you are below 50% when you turn it on, and if you're below 10%, it flashes quickly. So you can kind of turn it on at a glance and see if you probably need to charge it or if you need to charge it right damn now. But at the same time, there's that. There is a way to get more detailed voltage information out of it, but it involves a sort of a fancy algorithm of looking at this and knowing how many it counts, and it's not a linear scale. So it's just, I miss the screen that is on things like the 10,000 lumen guy here, where it tells you directly, like I'm on standby, we're at 4,000 volts, and you have this much runtime remaining. Because right now at this level, I've got more than 180 hours on, right? And so that's kind of nice. And it tells you exactly how much longer you've got running at this light level. That can be very nice, right? And so I'm definitely missing the screen element that is on many of the other T-series lights. Even the T4K has it, right? So I'm not being out of line here and asking for it in a smaller form factor. So I do definitely miss that. Next thing, the buttons here are very prominent, right? This big on button here, I can just drop the light and turn it on, right? That tells you something about, as opposed to one of a number of other lights where you will have, for instance, a little bit of a ring shield around this top button. So you kind of have to press your thumb in to turn it on. By the way, that didn't turn on because the rotary was down. But nonetheless, this is much more protected. I can drop this and nothing happens, whereas on this guy, this is the bottom of the light. So it's going to be very easy to turn on if you, for instance, bend over and hit this. And given that it is in your pocket potentially, that could light you, it could light some important bits of you on fire. So that's not necessarily great. You're going to end up using that lockout mode more often, and the fact that it's not necessarily the most intuitive thing to do is not necessarily amazing. Next thing, this guy is, like I said, the lockout mode is not super straightforward to trigger, right? And I know people are, oh my God, Nick, you're an idiot. It's so easy. But in practice, for me, it doesn't end up feeling that way. Right, so there is that. Next thing, light coloration on this guy is not amazing. I'm going to just show it to you here on the, and what you're going to see is that it's a little hard to see, but there is sort of a central area that is a little bit more yellowish here, and then it's a much bluer on the outside here, as opposed to something that has a much more consistent light like this guy right here, where everything is roughly the same color, given this is an Nichia emitter, higher CRI and such. So it's not the amazing light coloration. It's not high color rendering index, anything like that. It's just sort of... Next thing, it is pricey. This is $160, and that's a lot of flashlights right there, right? You could buy a number of high output flashlights for the price of one of these guys. And I'm really not sure that buying basically you are paying for the extra 9,000 lumen turbo mode here. I'm not sure it's worth that for most people, right? That is almost too bright, and you don't get it for very long, so it's just, I don't really see it. That's not something that strikes me as a great approach. Next thing, this guy is very pricey. It has a non-replaceable, I'm sorry, I said that already. Next thing, this guy is got a non-replaceable battery. I am getting really tired of non-replaceable batteries on $100 plus lights. And this is an area where my thinking has shifted over time. Like a tool that you spend this amount of money on, $150, $160, should last you for a long time. And non-replaceable batteries mean that every single discharge cycle is an inevitable march towards this becoming e-waste, right? Every time you use the battery, the capacity goes down a little bit more and more and more and more and more. And in practice, that means that this light cannot be repaired down the road, right? Nitecore won't send you a new battery pack. They just say it is not replaceable. And that's not even, it's not good. And by the way, I can't even figure out how to take this apart. Like I can't unscrew it or anything like that, right? This is kind of ugly, environmentally and otherwise. If I could put in my, and by the way, what is in here is a 21700 battery, according to their website. But I would appreciate it if I could put in my own 21700 at the cost of maybe a little extra length, a little extra thickness. I get that there are costs associated with doing that, but I think that would be a lot better because having a non-replaceable battery in something like this is planned obviously obsolescence, 100%. Whether it's intended that way or otherwise, it is. And that means that sooner or later, this is going to need to be trash when it didn't really need to be. So they made a decision here that means this won't last forever. I mean, nothing lasts forever, but this won't last as long as a light with replaceable batteries. It's for damn sure, and I really dislike that. Planned obsolescence is one of the uglier inventions of the modern era. Then finally, on the bad side, this form factor is super awkward. It is very, very weird. To start with, the balance on this guy is someplace closer to here, which doesn't feel like it's so far off, but it's definitely very, very top-heavy. And especially if you're gripping it in this way, using the little finger grabby thing here, it is very, very front-heavy, right? It's also a relatively heavy light in and of itself. I'll throw this guy up here on the scale. What we're going to see here is this guy is coming in at 7.96 ounces, as opposed to, this little guy coming in at 3.8, or this guy coming in here at 5.3. This is a very, very beefy light. It is very heavy. It's also very wide, right? It goes from being a relatively vanilla, like from here back, this is a relatively vanilla flashlight, but then you take this part out and it's like, whoa, right? And to be fair, I've looked at other lights with similar kind of layouts before. This is the ThruNite TC20, but at the same time, having this very skinny back here, and then I just don't see it. But more importantly, there is just a bunch of stuff on here, right? You've got the clip, you've got yourself the charging ports here, you got yourself this little bit, which is intended to allow you to grab it a little bit more easily with your fingers like this. But the problem is, with the clip mounted on there, it's just not great, because it's most of the time, you have exactly one way that you can really grip this effectively, and even still, the clip is rubbing against your fingers here. All of this together means that this thing has the ergonomics of a pineapple. There just really isn't a comfortable way to grab this guy. I just can't. Every single place I do it has the clip digging into me, has this bit digging into me. It's not great. You can remove the clip, by the way, which means you only have this digging into you, but I don't think you can remove this little guy here, or at least I've not been able to, and that's just not excellent, right? So I think having this on there, although it makes sense from this perspective, holding it with this very specific grip, ends up making every other grip markedly worse and ends up interacting badly with the clip. It's just not great. Honestly, ergonomically, this is just this form factor is not good. So to me, all of that is the bad, is that the form factor is super awkward and just not great. It is a non-replaceable battery. It's very pricey. The light coloration's not great. The buttons are very easy to hit without a lockout mode. And the battery indicator is not particularly, well, great relative to the other ones in the series. On the ugly front, there is one ugly issue here, and that is the fact that the disco mode, the strobe light mode, is very easy to accidentally enter. Folks who are sensitive to flashing lights, go on ahead and look away from your screen right now. I'll tell you when to come back, but basically, here's the problem. So right now, the light is in, I think, high mode. No, that was medium. What I want to do, let's say I end up in low. I turn it on and I end up in low, and I want to very quickly get up to a higher mode. It's very instinctual. So the way that you do that, of course, is you press the button over and over again, and that gets you up to high mode. But it's very easy as a human to go, okay, so I have to press the button 3 times to get there. And so suddenly, click, click, and we're in disco flashing mode, right? That's really ugly. I have turned this guy into disco mode more times than I can count because I was just going a little too fast to move it to the next level up. It's nice that you can go straight to turbo, but oftentimes you don't want turbo. You want something in the middle there. And so the fact that you have to purposefully slow down, and by the way, strobe flashing light people, come on back. We're good to go. But the fact that you get instant disco if you're trying to move quickly to the higher settings, that's ugly. That's a really bad design choice. And I feel like they should have really done that a little bit differently. They could have found some other way to do that, because in practice, most people don't need the disco mode, and you shouldn't end up in disco mode just because you're trying to move to the higher modes, right? That is a dumb decision. And so I really, that to me is ugly. So on the final conclusion front, the light is sort of nice, and at the same time, sort of dumb. It's durable. It's got a lockout mode. It's got USB recharging, an easy interface, easy turbo, lots of levels, reasonable run times, and frankly, more output than you possibly want in your pocket. I do miss the display from some of the other TM models. The buttons are very easy to hit without a lockout mode on. The light itself is very pricey. The coloration so-so. The lockout is not necessarily straightforward to do. The battery cannot be replaced, making this guy effectively disposable. It has the ergonomics of a gym sock full of carpentry nails, and the disco mode is super easy to enter accidentally. Conclusion here here is kind of tough, honestly. Nitecore makes a bunch of different lights for a bunch of different lives, for a bunch of different purposes, right? You can get, the TM10K, which is ridiculous, or you can get the 4K, which is a little less so, or the tiny, the tip. I've reviewed a bunch of different, and plus they make a bunch of the boring tube light tactical things that everybody and their mother makes, right? I mean, these kinds of things are out there. They make a bunch of different stuff, ranging from LOL to EDC, and this is sort of an awkward medium, right? You heard of a happy medium? This is an awkward medium, because it's not like an, oh my god, huge light, right? Like, okay, if you are looking for an actual freaking searchlight, then you are probably going to want something like this. You are probably going to want a massive, gigantic, oh my god, searchlight like this guy from Immolent, right? This is actually got the runtime. It's got the durability, it's got all of the things you need to actually run this for freaking ever. And that could be a really nice thing, but this isn't quite that, right? This isn't actually a full-on searchlight. But at the same time, it's not particularly great for everyday carry either, right? It's just sort of weird. It's in an awkward medium. It's a good light. It puts out plenty of light. And I do appreciate the simpler interface relative to things like the TM10K, which is always a little bit weird, right? It's always a little bit unintuitive. But I keep coming back to this form factor, which is just super duper awkward, right? I mean, it's workable, right? You could use this. This is not a light that is completely unusable. But it's like every single grip on this thing is wrong. There is not a way to hold this light in a way that it wants to be held. It is just not good in any grip. And I can't help but feel like they tried so hard to make this just another tactical tube light that it ended up growing this thing on the front of it, and it ended up just sort of losing the plot a little bit, right? I can't figure out exactly who this is meant for. Your average tube light, just like an everyday tube light, gives out more than enough light for everyday carry, and it gives you plenty of runtime with it, right? If you're doing search and rescue, you want one of the big boys, generally, right? You want something with more staying power than this guy has. And so this is sort of in that class of products which I can't recommend, not because it's bad or even awful, but because I can't think of a human I'd recommend it to, right? If you are looking at this guy and you're thinking, I have the perfect use for that, let me know. I'm curious about it, but I just can't figure out who this could go to, right? Because it's not like $160 for a light with an expiration date is cheap enough that you can just kind of experiment. The Tip SE, it's like, are you going to carry this much? No, but at the same time, it's cheap enough that, don't end up loving it. No major harm done. $160 is not an amount of money people can just kind of toss away. So I just don't know. I don't know who this light is for. Maybe it's just them showing off. Maybe they're making something funky that they think flashlight collectors are going to love, and maybe some will. But ultimately, I kind of end up feeling like at some level, this is a good light. At some level, particularly ergonomically, it's a very frustrating one. And if you get a great deal on one and you don't mind the weird form factor, then great, okay, sure, rock on. But otherwise, I think you're ultimately going to want to take a different tack. Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. 9,000 lumens! Bye now.